Well, hello again YouTube. My name is Hans and welcome to my channel and to this episode of Darktable Insights. Darktable is one of the best free tools for editing and organizing your photos, but I guess you know that by now. Today I'm gonna come back to some of the modules I talked about last time and I'll introduce a new one. So let's get started. So this time I'll start with the base curve. There are a couple of things that I didn't mention last time. First of all, there's this fusion, which is the possibility to merge 2 or 3 exposures of the same image in order to reduce the contrast or expand the dynamic range, however you want to look at it. It's like HDR from one exposure. So if we choose 2 exposures here, we get these new alternatives: exposure shift and exposure bias. It takes one exposure with normal settings and then another exposure with at the default with the one stop overexposed in order to lift the shadows and get more details into the shadows. So if you turn it off, we have this. Turn it on, the shadows are lifted a bit. This is with one stop difference, so it's not doing that much. If we change it to 2 stops, then you can see we lift the shadows quite a bit. One disadvantage of it is that in the transition here between the dark and light areas, there is something going on. You can see the treetops here are getting actually darker. So better use it with care. You can see if we turn it off again, then this treetop here is getting lighter and more natural. Turn it on again. Also the exposure bias, that determines whether we lift the shadows or we'll reduce highlights. When it's at 1, we lift the shadows. If we turn it down to -1, then instead we reduce the highlights. Say that 100%. See, the highlights are getting down. And if we set it to 0, if we set it to 0, then you get something in between. So this is without it, and this is with it. This is with 2 exposures. You can also use 3 if you want to. Then you have, in this case, 1 normal exposure, 1 is 2 stops underexposed for the highlights, and 1 is 2 stops overexposed for the shadows. So it's a possibility we have. But with these artifacts, you should use it with care, but you should also know that it's there. And there's also one other thing about the base curve. If we take a look at this swan image, you see I have 2 versions of it. This one is with a normal base curve, and this other one is with the base curve turned off. You can see it's turned off here. So what that does is actually to bring out more detail in the highlight area, and on this one it's in the feathers. So if we go back, you see the whites are more crushed, with less contrast and less detail. And the other thing that happens actually is that the red in the beak is getting more pronounced, and also the blue in the sea is reduced, which is, I see just as a benefit, both of those. So all I've done from this one to this one is to turn off the base curve, and when I do that, it gets the image gets darker. So I've compensated with exposure, pulled that up a little bit extra. So whenever you want much detail in the whites, and you can try to turn off the base curve and see if that helps you. Now we're gonna go back to this image again, and we're gonna just have the normal base curve like this, and we're gonna take a new look at shadows and highlights. Because last time I talked about the haloing around the edges that you can get with the shadows and highlights. And if I turn it on here, at the default you don't see much of it. But if we drag the controls out, then you start to see it. You can see it gets darker on the treetops here, and also lighter in the sky. And actually most of the highlight adjustment is done here, which is not very nice. Drag it all the way down and you get this ugly black patch in the middle of the sky. So what we can do to reduce the haloing, first of all, I tried on this test image, I tried last time to reduce the radius. Can you do that and get a better result? This is default. If we drag it down, it's get better. And I'll just do it again. On this one, if turn on shadows and highlights, and does it extremely, and then I reduced the radius all the way down to 0. You can see it looks pretty good, but don't do that on a real image, because if we do it here, turn the radius all the way down, then the detail starts disappearing in the grass and in the trees. And with, oops, sorry, with, what was the white point? And with more aggressive adjustments for the shadows and highlights, the more detail disappears. So that's no good. Instead, try to find the best compromise. And also compression, you can see, drag it down and it starts to look very HDR-y. Drag it the other way, it gets more natural, but the effect is smaller. So what you can do is to soften with the bilateral filter instead of Gaussian. That will take the edges into account, which means that you reduce the haloing very much. zoom in and maybe see the difference better. Here with Gaussian, and then with bilateral filter. So now it's not too bad. Now it's not too bad actually, even though we have quite aggressive adjustments for shadows and highlights. So I guess the morale is do it gently, do it with care, and don't overuse this module. So the next module I'm going to talk about is today is levels again, and for that we're switching over to this image. Here in the levels module I showed you the manual controls last time. I think I only showed you the sliders, but you also have these color pickers. You can choose this one, oops, and this marker appears. You can place that where you want it to be black, and we can place this one on white. Yeah, there isn't anything white in this image, so let's just reset it. But you get the point. And this one on something that's supposed to be middle gray. So if we reset, and there's these automatic modes. Actually 2 of them as far as I can see, and they give different results. I'll try to show you. First, here is the mode manual or automatic. If we choose automatic, then Darktable will set black and white point automatically, and will take a snapshot of this. Then I'm gonna reset the module, start from scratch, turn it off, click this auto button, and we get a different result. This is brighter. I don't know why, but if we take a look at the snapshot we took from the automatic mode, then you see that this is darker, with less contrast. The bird's a bit brighter, and the sea is darker. I don't know why. I tried to ask in a forum about it, but I didn't get a reply, so I don't know why, but that's it. So with this image, I'm going to show you 2 methods of enhancing the shapes in the image. We got these roots here creeping out over the ground, and what I want to do is to enhance the roundness, make it a little bit more 3D. And the first way I'm going to do it is with the low pass filters. I'm going to use 3 or 4 low pass filters stacked on top of each other. First we set up one with a radius of about 50 pixels or so. You can see that blurs the image, so we just only see the larger features. And I'm going to set saturation to 0 and to blend it uniformly with soft light blend mode. There, now you can see without it and with it. I'm also gonna increase brightness a little bit, so we don't lose any overall brightness. And it's a little bit much, So I'm gonna reduce the opacity. I just want a little bit at this point. So 60%, I think that's enough. So then I'm gonna duplicate this low pass filter, get another one, and we're gonna reduce the radius to about 30. Then we do the same again, duplicate, reduce the radius to 15, 16, thereabouts. And maybe we're going to take one more to get the finer details. Reduce the radius to 8. There we are. Now we can use the history stack to turn off all these so we can compare. This is before and this is after. It's a little bit, still a little bit heavy, so I have to reduce the opacity of them a bit more. So let's try now. There's without it, there's with it. That's better. Now it looks a little bit tidier, doesn't it? And the roots look rounder. So if we take a snapshot here and go back and we look at the snapshot, this is before and this is after. Also the ground looks a bit tidier. So that's one way of doing this. There's another way. That is with the equalizer. And we have the equalizer here. Here, this is the different frequencies or sizes. Sizes of features in the image. So if we take the control here, take the lower control, drag it up, and see what happens. This is very CPU intensive, so it takes a bit of time. But it increases contrast on the larger features. And then if we take the points to the right, it takes finer and finer details. Up here it's like sharpening. So what we can do to get more or less the same effect as we did is to take several of these points and push them up a little bit. You see that gives somewhat of the same effect, but in a slightly different way. And I can reduce the opacity, reduce the effect a bit with the mix slider. Then we can take our snapshot, snapshot, this was without and this is with it. I didn't take a snapshot with the low pass filters, so we can't compare them. but you see it's another variety of the same effect with a slightly different result. And I guess that was the end of adjusting tone in Darktable for this time. Maybe I'll come back to it later, but I think you got the basics now. That's all for today. Next time we'll start looking at colors. If you like this channel, then hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. I'd also be very happy if you check out my other outlets online. All links are in the description. And if there's anything special you want me to talk about Darktable, then please let me know in the comments. So see you next week. Bye!